Welcome back to Rocker's Beer Review. Today we've got a very special interview, the first for the channel. I'm interviewing one of my good friends, Matt De Bono. And Matt De Bono is here to talk about, primarily, his experience of supporting Marillion back in the early 2000s, I think it was, with his band King Rat. So, welcome, Matt. Thanks for joining us on the channel.
You're welcome, Martin. Rocker, thanks for having me on. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem at all. So obviously with the buzz with the new Marillion album recently released, obviously the new songs and probably a tour coming. I just thought some of my viewers would be interested to know what it's like, to be a support band for Marillion. I mean, obviously they've been going a long time. So a little bit of, if we just sort of start a little bit with obviously your band King Rat. Just tell us a little bit about the band, how you formed, where you are really at the moment and your sort of role in it, really.
Yeah, sure. Well, we were thinking back about this when you asked, to come on and talk about supporting Marillion, and it was worked out that it was in 2007, which is 15 years ago now, and that seems crazy, but that was when I guess that was when King Rat was in full flow, and we were doing most work at that time. Probably the band had formed in a few years before that, early 2000s. It was I was working in the British Medical Association in London, not a particularly rock and roll job, but I was working selling books and publishing books there, and I met a chap who was a singer, and I'd been in bands before, and we kind of hit it off, and we started working on some material together, and he'd written some songs, and that was more of a kind of folky rock thing, and that would have been around about 99, 2000, something like that, maybe, or maybe a bit earlier, maybe end of the 90s, and we formed the band and we played there, and then that kind of went along for a couple of years and then fell apart because creative differences, the usual thing with bands, but the drummer and I, Gary Cappuccini, he was in the band, and actually, no, it was the whole of the rest of the band. It was Gary. We had a bass player, a friend of mine from university, Dickie Blench, and my good friend Sarah, who was our keyboard player and played a bit of violin. We decided we wanted to keep going, even when we split with the singer, and we advertised for a new singer in the early 2000s and found a new singer. That was Angus, and changed the band name and kind of changed the direction a bit. I guess we went from being more of a folk rock type band into being a bit more of a harder rock, bit progressive rock. The usual kind of differences with us all pulling in different directions, but it was definitely more of a rocky band. So it came out of that contact I had from my work, but we moved it on into King Rat, and we've been playing around the North London scene, places like the Bull and Gate in Kentish Town and the Dublin Castle in Camden, the usual places that lots of bands, London-based bands anyway, end up playing. But we had ambitions to do more, and we organised a couple of small tours of the Midlands and the north of England when we played, where we had contacts and we knew a few venues, and we did that. And then I took a redundancy from my work in, I think, 2004, and I took that as an opportunity to sort of spend more time working on the band. So I didn't take another job, really. I did bits and pieces of teaching music and guitar and things, but we spent a lot of time that year recording some of our songs and putting together our first sort of self-produced album, which was just called
and I've actually got a copy of it here. This is it here. So this is your debut album, just titled King Rat. Quite a few songs on this, and then so you recorded this in 2005.
Yeah, so that was probably everything that we'd been working on, of our own. Well, some of those songs even came out of the previous band that was a bit more folk rocky, but it was the songs that we'd written rather than the singer from that band, Clive. So yeah, that was like we splurged everything out, so we've got to get it recorded, and did it all very lo-fi. Just went into a rehearsal studio. We didn't do any of it in a proper recording studio. Recorded in a rehearsing studio using whatever microphones we could get our hands on. I used my redundancy money to buy some computer equipment that we could record with. And we put it down in there, but we were pretty pleased with the results, actually. It was because it wasn't that long before then where we were trying to record things on 8-track cassette or 4-track cassette, and the technology was much more basic, and the kind of results you could get were much more basic. But you know, we were pleased with that because it was a nice record of the songs we'd been working on, and it was Angus was our singer at that point. But I think pretty much on that album he hadn't really contributed that much to the songwriting on there, but he was a great songwriter. He's a great songwriter as well, and he then did. And so on the follow-up stuff we did in the couple of years after that, his kind of style of songwriting came into it a bit more, and he was very much into bands like, well, he was a big Pink Floyd fan, so we started to bring some of that kind of sound into the band, and he played guitar and keyboards, and I'd always been a big Marillion fan, so there was a bit of that in there. But we definitely pulled in slightly different directions. Some of the band were more into, I guess, more at the time contemporary sounds like Radiohead and those kind of bands, and then I had always liked some kind of classic rock stuff and a background of playing in sort of heavier bands as well. So we all butted heads and brought that together, and the album's kind of a bit of a mishmash of those different sounds. But you know, I think that's how a lot of hopefully good bands end up with their own unique sound, you know.
Yeah, there's definitely a sort of, I mean, it's almost like your more modern progressive sound opposed to your sort of, I suppose, like your Dream Theater type of progressive, you know, widdly, lots of instrumental breaks. It was a lot more there. You can see there's obviously the Floyd influence, Marillion, probably, you know, I know you're a big Queen fan, and, you know, there's plenty of that sort of Queen influence in there as well. So the 13 tracks sort of album, and you put this together. Obviously, I presume you self-published it, and in terms of, you know, I presume you were selling them at gigs and things like that then, were you, in terms of getting the word around?
Absolutely, yeah, just bit by bit. We took them to gigs, and we put together the website, obviously, and we were promoting. But I think it was probably even still a bit early days there wasn't really the whole kind of social media thing. You know, MySpace was relatively new, so we put together a MySpace page. But we didn't do a lot of online promotion. It was gigging. Yeah, we went out to gigs and we sold CDs at the gigs, and twisted the arms of our friends to buy them, come along to the gigs. But yeah.
And so that leads me really into sort of how the gig supporting Marillion came about. Let's give us a little bit of background in terms of when that happened, you know, what tour it was on and where you played exactly.
Yeah, so I'd been a big fan of Marillion since I was a teenager, really. I remember getting into them during the Fish era, and then being a big fan when they switched over to when Fish left and Steve Hogarth joined, and following them at that time. And so I'd always followed them, and and then they, of course, were, you know, pioneers with the whole online promotion thing, and really, I guess, working out how to use the internet to promote and to crowdsource and to fund their album. So I'd been part of that, and I'd followed that with I guess it was Anarachnophobia was their first album where they'd got the fans to pre-order, and they'd done this big pre-order campaign. And I think that came off the back of a US tour where somebody in the US had got the fans together online. And I know that Mark Kelly was into the whole online thing. So I think because of that, although I'd been fans of bands before, I guess I was more connected into it because I'd connected up to their website, and I'd registered because I'd pre-ordered the albums. So I was on their email list. And then I remember seeing, I think they just sent out a communication saying for the next tour, and it would have been the Somewhere Else tour. So Marbles had been a big album for us in the band, because I talked about Angus, the singer, joining and being a bit of a Pink Floyd fan. And I felt that album had quite a Pink Floyd sound in places. And Angus had never really heard Marillion. So I said, yeah, you've got to listen to this. So I'd forced him to listen to the album, and he really liked it, you know, so he'd got into it. And I think he'd come with us to see them live. So he was into that. And then they did the next album, and then an email came around, just to all the people who were connected up to the email, the fan base emails, saying, we're looking for submissions from unsigned bands to support us on the Somewhere Else tour. And so that was 2007. And we'd just done, I think at that point, we'd recorded a second album, which had more of Angus's songs on there as well. And I think we tried to, the direction had moved a bit more off into that slightly more progressive kind of sound, I guess. And for me, I just thought, well, let's go for it, because we thought the songs were good. We thought the album we'd recorded was decent, although it's self-produced, so we were still learning about how to produce and how to make things sound professional. So we sent I think we sent a demo CD and some photos. We'd had some pictures of us taken outside of a rehearsal studio in North London, and a friend of ours who was a photographer took some shots of us. So we did it all through friends and people
I presume that was these pictures here, was it? Like this?
Yeah,
the album,
there we go. Yeah. Who are those young, fresh-faced, long-haired people? Yeah.
Yeah, the hair's a lot longer, and the
yes,
and a lot darker, I suppose.
Yeah, it's so we were trying to present us as that way. So we sent off the CD to Marillion's. It was Lucy Jordash who ran the fan club, and and I didn't expect too much. I mean, remember, this was a band that I'd seen play at Wembley Arena and big stadium. They were a big band that certainly towards the end of the 90s, and you could see how their career they'd gone down a different path, which has been really successful for them in as much as it's given them complete control over what they do. But we knew they weren't playing arenas, but they were certainly playing big venues that we had been to see them, places like the Forum in Kentish Town, and decent sized venues. So I sent the CD off thinking, well, we'll see what happens. And then I think we got an email back 6 weeks later saying, we really like the CD. We've selected you to play a support slot with Marillion on the upcoming tour. And I do remember getting it and thinking, I couldn't really believe it, because they were a band I'd been into for a long time. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. We didn't get the London support slot, even though we were a London-based band. They had another band in London, but we got the Cambridge Junction, which is, a decent venue. I think it's probably 1,000 capacity, something like that. So we just got the email from the band, from Lucy, saying, we'd like you to do that support slot.
So there was no sort of interview process, or they didn't want to see you to make sure that you did actually play these songs and you were actually musicians. And
no, it could have been a complete a hoax band. I think we'd sent off the album, and we had a website, and on the website we had you could see we had pictures of us playing live. I don't know if we had any live recordings, actually, probably not. So we could have looked good, but not actually been able to do it live. But no, they went based on the CD, and they gave us the gig on the strength of that.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. So they offered us the slot, and it was for the Cambridge Junction. We were looking back on the dates, weren't we? I think it was around June 2007. So then we started working on that set.
Yeah, you said June. Yeah, June 2000. Yeah, 2007. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a bit of arguing then about what songs we'd play, and what we would.
Yeah, so I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? You get this gig, and you think, well, not only are you playing with a band that that you've seen live before, you're a big fan of them. You're obviously probably in the back of your mind thinking, if we're going to make it, this is probably one of the best opportunities that we're going to have. So we need to make sure that we're on the top of our game. So how did you sort of think about in terms of the build up and the set list and what you were going to play? And I suppose the other thing was, did Marillion say to you what you could and couldn't play, and how long did they tell you how long you could play for example?
Yeah, we were definitely given a time for the set, and I can't remember if it was 30 or 40 minutes, but it was kind of what we were used to anyway, because we were used to playing the London pub and club circuit, where you'd be on with 3 or 4 other bands, and you'd normally get a 30 or 40 minute set, so it wasn't that we were used to playing hour and a half headline sets, because most unsigned bands in London, unless we booked a venue and did it ourselves, we were playing on promotion nights at different pubs and venues where we would get to play for that amount of time. But other than the time limit, they didn't give us any particular restrictions about what we could and couldn't play. So really, it was more that between us in the band, it was the arguments about what. When I say arguments, it's an interesting thing in bands, and you see this all the time in band interviews, where I think when you're working together a lot and working on original material, you get quite close as a unit, and there are times when you go out and you tour and you play gigs where you feel very close. It's like you against the world. You're trying to get somewhere. But then you also get these tensions where you kind of fight over tiny little things. And we used to fight a lot over tiny little bits of songs, you know, when we were writing songs. And, you know, there was a lot of, it wasn't the case that somebody would say, here's the song, we'd learn it and play it. We all tried to pull it apart. You know, I'd try and make the guitar solo a bit longer. And then, you know, we'd all just change bits of it and say, oh, we need a high backing vocal there that I can do. And we changed the arrangements. But anyway, we had a bit of debate about, I guess, whether we did the slightly more, the mellower kind of songs that maybe were more atmospheric, that we felt, well, that might be more of a Marillion kind of sound. And we had a couple of more upbeat kind of rockier songs where we were thinking, is that the sound we want to go for? But in the end, you've got like 30 minutes to come out there and try and win people over. So I think in the end, we kind of knew what was our stronger material. But we did all original material. We didn't want to do any covers. So we wanted to go out there and hit them with our songs. There was a thing that when we turned up to the venue, we got to Cambridge Junction and we came in with all that kit and the Marillion crew were there. It's a relatively small stage at the Cambridge Junction, and Marillion, you know, have a big drum kit and a big keyboard set up, and that was all kind of there on the stage. And then the crew saw us and we came in and they started saying to us, it's a bit crowded. I think you're going to have to just get up and do an acoustic set, just one guitar and vocal. And, you know, our sound was quite, I mean, Angus and I did do acoustic gigs, just the two of us, but we were determined that we wanted to play the full King Rat sound. We had quite a big sound as well. We had Sarah played a double keyboard rack and Angus played a bit of guitar and I played lead guitar. We had a bass player and Gary on drums, and we were determined we wanted to do the full thing because we'd worked out this set and we had some big epic songs. So I can't remember how we convinced them, but we convinced them that we could squeeze the drum kit onto the side of the stage and we could squeeze it in, and we cleared all the space we could, and we just about fitted ourselves on there. And we've got some pictures still of the gig, and it looks quite good because it's a nice big wide stage, but actually we didn't have a lot of depth to go back because we were just crammed into the gaps around all of the Marillion kit. But yeah, so there was a bit of we were a bit nervous when they said to us, you might not be able to play with a full band, but we managed to convince them and we got everything on. And I'm glad we did because it was a really
I'm sure. I mean, if you had done it, you know, just an acoustic, then I'm sure, you know, I'm sure that Sarah and Gary would have been going, well, what am I going to do? Stand on the side or something, you know?
Yeah, we would have had to get Gary on the bongos or something, but no, it wouldn't have been. Well, because as I say, we did do some acoustic gigs, and it was great fun, but it was a different kind of thing. And when we did the acoustic shows, Angus and I went out and we played some acoustic versions of some of our songs, but we also played around with some covers that we enjoyed. Because I was saying, for this gig, we wanted to play our own songs and showcase that material. But we did an acoustic gig for. There used to be a concert in Aylesbury called the Hobble on the Cobbles, and it was around about that same time.
Marillion fans watching will probably have heard of that and probably attended as well over the years. Yeah,
because it's Aylesbury, isn't it, where the band come from? So we played there when Fish was headlining, and actually it was an interesting one because Fish headlined and I think definitely Steve Rothery and Peter Wavis came on stage with him and played the song. Probably did Market Square Heroes, I think, because it was in the Aylesbury Market Square. But we had the gig to do the kind of an after show party. There's an old National Trust pub there, and they have a big courtyard out the back, and we played there for Fish and his crew and the band and some various other VIP people, and we had a whole evening to do there, so we had a lot of space to fill. So we did like a kind of an epic stadium set where we did our band set, and then we did an acoustic bit in the middle, and then we did some more rocky stuff. So we played some acoustic songs there, some with Angus on piano and me on guitar, and some just with acoustic guitars. And at that point we did do a Marillion cover that we'd worked on, a song that we liked, but it was Now She'll Never Know from the Radiation album, Steve Hogarth era song. And
that's quite an obscure Marillion song, I think. You know,
it is. Yeah,
I don't know if I've ever seen Marillion play that song live. I don't know. Have you ever seen them play live? Or
I think I've got a recording of them doing it live at the there's a live unplugged album they did in around that time. But yeah, I don't think I've seen them play it live in like a full band scenario. But it was an interesting one because there, obviously, we were doing the gig as a kind of a entertainment for Fish and his crew, and we picked a Steve Hogarth era song to play. We played it because we both liked the song, me and Angus, and it's a nice chilled out song for those kind of acoustic venues where you're playing in candlelit upstairs of a pub somewhere and everyone's sitting around candlelit drinking their bottle of wine. It was quite a nice chilled vibe, and we used to do that and some Steely Dan and some old blues stuff, and it was a real mixture of just songs that we liked the vibe of, and so we already knew it, so we put it in there. But I don't know, acoustic, Incommunicado or something probably would have been harder to do. Yeah. I'm not sure of a Fish era song that would have worked well on an acoustic set.
Maybe Going Under you should have done.
Yeah, well, that's even more obscure, isn't it? One album B-side. But
that's a great song, though, at the end of the day. Yeah.
It is a great song, yeah. It's a good song, yeah. I would have, yeah. So,
but you didn't fancy, for the, at the main gig, thinking, how do we get the Marillion fans on our side? Maybe we'll kick off with Grendel or something, and we'll
that would. I think if we'd have done Grendel, we would have used like most of our allotted time slot to do it. But it would have been it'd be great fun to have done that. In fact, at one point, I thought, I've always been I think I'm a bit lazy at learning covers. Although when I started out in bands, it was when you remember when we were at school, and of course we started learning covers because we hadn't written any songs. So we did used to learn covers in those days. And in the early days, you do whatever's easy to learn when you're starting to learning to play. And then as time went on, we did different songs. It was, I guess, we were into heavy, but it was always melodic stuff. We were always into melodic music, really. But I remember years later thinking it'd be great fun to do a covers band. This is when Marillion were doing all the Steve Hogarth era stuff, to go back and do the Fish era songs, and I'm sure there's a load of covers bands out there.
Yeah, I know is it still Marillion or something there? They seem to be sort of quite a sort of a big, because obviously these days you get a lot of these sort of cover bands that are playing the songs that either the main bands aren't around anymore, or they can't quite play those songs, or they don't want to choose to play them. People obviously want to listen to them, so there could be I think you probably end up getting paid more money by doing that than you would. Yeah,
there's a big audience for. Look at bands like Australian Pink Floyd who play big venues, and are big productions. But there was another band that I was into that were like even less fashionable than Marillion. And there's a band called Magnum where I quite like their early, like 70s, quite art house kind of proggy material. By the time they got to the 80s, they'd become a bit bland, middle of the road rock, and a lot of the stuff that they're known for later on, I thought, I don't want to upset anyone, but I thought was a bit bland. But I like their early stuff, where like the first couple of albums before they had any hits, where it was all quite Kingdom of Madness, was quite obscure, but the production wasn't very good. And I had this idea that I remember discussing this with Phil, who played keyboards in our band time. We could do a covers band called Marillion, and we would only play the early stuff from both bands. But I think I was always too lazy.
There's probably somebody out there watching this now thinking, I'm writing that down, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't play any there. Magnum. I know Magnum have just released a new album in the last few weeks, so they're still going.
They're still going, yeah. Again, without wanting to upset anyone, I would say probably Marillion have been more creative in their later output than Magnum. I would say probably the output has become fairly similar over the years. But actually, it did quite early on for me anyway. But I like the really early stuff before they had any kind of big success, because I think they had some success in the late 80s where they were. But the early stuff I thought was really inventive and interesting. And then if you compare that, again, when Marillion were doing Fugazi and those kind of albums, they were really quite interesting songs, I thought, in a kind of a proggy way. It'd be quite fun to mash it all together. But whether there'd be much of an audience for that, I don't know.
So I think, before the sort of, I think the stuff that people really want to know is what obviously meeting the band, what it was like backstage. So I'm going to probably just split this video into two parts. So we've done about 25 minutes on this part, just a bit of introduction. So we'll leave it there for today until the next video. So the next video, if you're watching this and you haven't seen the new video, please subscribe so you know when it comes out. If you like it, please hit like. It helps more people see it, and obviously really helps the channel. So that's enough for today. We're going to go to part 2 in just for the next video.